The title of our research project is Does Food Insecurity Change During Health Profession Students' Education? I'd like to acknowledge the people who worked with me on this project. So I'm Susie Okere. Lita Rasulian, Dr. Lita Rasulian also participated in this project, as well as students Tyler Bryant, Caroline Casillas, Michaela Cook, and Abby Starr. And this project was completed at Texas State University in the Department of Physical Therapy within the College of Health Professions. We'll start with a little bit of background information, specifically with the definition of food insecurity as it was used for this study. So food insecurity is defined as not having enough money for consistent and dependable access to enough food to support an active and healthy lifestyle. So it's not just access to food, it's access to healthy foods. Food insecurity, the big issue is that food insecurity has been associated with adverse physical, cognitive, and mental health outcomes. And so obviously that's a concern for graduate students. And food insecurity has been well documented in the undergraduate student population, but there's a lack of research documenting food insecurity in graduate students. And there are reasons to think that food insecurity can be different in undergraduate versus graduate students. For example, a lot of times undergraduate students may have more family or friends support, and so food insecurity may not be as big an issue for undergraduate students. And also undergraduate students are more likely to have access or to take advantage of meal plans offered by the university. So the purpose of this study was to compare the levels of food insecurity of graduate students, but we're comparing those who just began a Doctor of Physical Therapy program, so they are our first year students, and we're comparing those to students who are about to graduate, so after they have completed 3 years of the Doctor of Physical Therapy program. The methods that we used to begin with, our study design was a descriptive observational design. And our participants were 80 Texas State University Doctor of Physical Therapy graduate students. So there were 27 males and 53 females. And over 50% of our participants were of racial and ethnic minority. And the average age was about 25 years, just under 25 years. And this is pretty typical for the students that participate in our Doctor of Physical Therapy program. Continuing with the methodology and moving on to the instrumentation, we gave 2 surveys. The first one was just an 11-question demographic survey, and the second part of the survey was the U.S. Adult Food Security Survey. And so the way we conducted the study is we first received approval from Texas State University's Institutional Review Board. Then we had first-year students complete the surveys during the first semester of their 3-year program. Third-year students completed 2 years of didactic education and 1 year of clinical education. And then right before they graduated, so this is after 9 semesters, the third-year students completed the demographic survey and the food security survey. The way we performed data collection was through an email, and we used Qualtrics software to deliver the survey. The email that we sent all of the students provided the informed consent, and it contained a link to the surveys. And class time was provided for both classes to complete the survey. So the first year students were on campus, and so we just had them complete the survey as part of their class time, and that was to increase the level of participation versus having the students complete it on their own time. For the third year students, they do come back onto campus just prior to graduation for a few days for some final paperwork and some final course obligations. And so we delivered this survey to them while they were physically on campus for one of those days, again, to increase the likelihood of participation. For data analysis, we just used Microsoft Excel, and we used an unpaired t-test to compare the mean food security survey scores for first-year students and third-year students. So the results of our study demonstrated that first-year students had higher food security survey scores compared to the third-year students. And a higher score reflects greater levels of food insecurity. So, in conclusion, this study documented higher levels of food insecurity in first-year students compared to third-year students. And this was actually a bit of a surprise for us. We had hypothesized that the first-year students would have greater food security. And we thought that since they had just come out from undergrad, that they might have more resources available to them compared to the third-year students. We had hypothesized that the third-year students had already completed undergraduate work and they had completed now their third year of graduate studies, and so we thought their financial resources might have been a lot lower, since this is a total now of, approximately 7 years of education that they've completed. But what we realized when the first year students had greater insecurity, we looked at some possible explanations for that. And so we identified that our first year students are in class between 6 and 8 hours each day, typically Monday through Friday. And so they're in class so much that they don't have a whole lot of time to secure a job either in the evenings or on the weekends. Usually they need that evening time and that weekend time either just to recover from the long class days or to use that time for studying. And so it may be harder for first year students to get a job and have some additional income. For the third year students, they have been on their clinical rotations for a year by the time they take this survey. And so what we hypothesized is that a number of the third year students may use resources that they have available to them or support systems that are available to them as a factor when they're choosing their clinical site. So they do have input on where their clinical sites are going to be. And so if students are choosing clinical site locations where they have existing support systems, they may, for instance, stay with friends or family. And so they may be not paying rent, or they may be paying a much more reduced rent. Same thing with food. They may not be paying for groceries, or they may not be paying as much for groceries compared to first year students, where unless the first year students live right, have family or friends right by our university, the first year students are likely to be paying rent on their own, like full rent on their own, and they're likely to be buying all of their own groceries. And so we think that for these reasons, the third year students may have not had as high levels of food insecurity as the first year students. Future research should look to replicate this study. This was just done with 2 cohorts of students. And even though it was 80 students total, that was a decent N. We can't be sure that there's just not some kind of nuance about these 2 particular cohorts. And so we would look to replicate this study with additional cohorts to have a greater sample size to get a better reflection of multiple different cohorts. And the other thing that we would suggest is to document this food insecurity in graduate students from other health professions to see if there is some difference between the physical therapy program versus students in other graduate programs. So the overall relevance of this is that since this study demonstrated that first year students have higher levels of food insecurity, we should really try to identify interventions that are specific to first year students to really help support them. And then the other thing is to use these interventions so that ultimately we're minimizing the effects, those adverse effects, whether they're physical, cognitive, or mental health outcomes that are associated with food insecurity. because we don't want these negative outcomes to then influence the success of the student in our graduate programs.